questions. I'm just seeing who is seeking the call, and I'm going to Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for appearing again today. First questions go to accuracy of data. The last estimate session, we had a conversation around the accuracy of one of your data sets. I want to follow up on that. The data set is births by year and month of occurrence by state. It's available in your Data Explorer. The conversation was around the reduction in births shown towards the end of 2021, and that reduction was quite dramatic. I accept your position that this effect is caused by delays in reporting of births, and a lot of December's reports came through in January. Is this correct so far?
That is correct. There's a pattern which is repeated every year, which is that the first unrevised estimate of births in December is of the order of 6,000 or 7,000, and then once you have the final numbers, the numbers are of the order of 22,000 or 23,000. So there is an enormous revision because, for precisely the reason you just mentioned, namely that not everyone has recorded the birth of their child. I think they have other things on their mind than making sure that the ABS gets its numbers right.
Okay. That data set is titled Births by Month of Occurrence, not Births by Month of Reporting. Since 2021 data was not available until the 19th of October 2022, why was 10 months insufficient time to completely compile births for the full 2021 calendar year? I note that December is still showing 6,600 births against an expected 20,000 in your Data Explorer, as you just said. Why is this data still incomplete 17 months later and still wrong?
So it's unrevised. I wouldn't use the word wrong. So the answer is we have a schedule for births which has been the same schedule for an extended period, and when we provide the revised numbers, we haven't yet got the revised numbers for 2021, but when we do, we have a pretty good idea of the order of magnitude that they'll be. And this hasn't changed. We have been doing it on this timetable for many years.
Thank you. The database now carries a warning, thank you for this, incomplete data. Have you made a note of where else incomplete data is being loaded to your Data Explorer and ensured incomplete data warnings are attached as you load that data?
So we provide preliminary data for a range of series, and we did more of that during COVID because we thought it was important for people who were making decisions to have the most up-to-date data that they could possibly have. And so we brought forward some releases, understanding that they would not be complete, and we were transparent about that. But it is certainly the case that revisions are part of producing statistics. So whether it's births or whether it's the national accounts also get revised. It's a common feature. We do not revise the CPI because the CPI, quarterly CPI, there are legislative indexation arrangements, and so again, it's a long-standing practice that we do not revise the CPI, but for many other series, the revisions are a standard practice.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would complain, Dr. Gruen, about data needing to be revised. Maybe the speed of it might be something that we might inquire about. But what I was getting to was, are there any other data sets in your Data Explorer that need the words incomplete data as a warning because bad decisions are made off bad data and it becomes misinformation?
So I don't think it's misinformation. We are as transparent as we can possibly be about the nature of the data. So, for instance, we have a provisional. We put out provisional data for deaths, which we have actually discussed in previous estimates hearings. That is based on the available information 2 months after the end of the reference period, and those are also revised subsequently. And when we first started producing that data, again, that was during COVID, during the early phase of COVID, we did it purely on the basis of doctor-certified deaths, which is about 85% of overall deaths. We've managed to include some coroner-certified deaths in that series, but it's still incomplete when it's first published 2 months after the period. So there are several data sets where we are very clear about the fact that they're not the final data, and that extra data will come in for the period that we're talking about.
Okay, because I noticed that I'm advised that the incomplete data warning arrived after our session last time.
That is possible. That is possible.
So I'm just wondering if there are any others. The dataset Causes of Death Australia for calendar 2021 was released in October last year. Can I confirm that 2022 will be released no later than October this year, please?
I'm sure you can. There'll be someone here who can tell you for sure. I don't have the. That is around October is when we publish the annual data for the previous year. But we can take that on notice and give you an answer for sure.
Thank you. Provisional mortality is still showing that deaths are running above the previous known range. Has the ABS received any request from any minister or department, federal or state, for an explanation of where the increase is or what data the ABS has which could cast light on that substantial increase in mortality?
So we do talk about provisional deaths, and we do talk about what proportion of those are people who died with or of COVID and of other sources. So I think I don't think there's a mystery about what is happening, but and we get lots of requests for our data, so I can't answer the question about whether. I mean, since it's on the website,
so they wouldn't need to ask you.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering, in particular, has Health asked, but as you said, they don't need to. So you send reports routinely, or you just publish on the website?
We publish, and we answer media inquiries, or for that matter, we have outposted people in many of the departments in Canberra, and we have continuing discussions with them. If a department had a specific request, they would that would be straightforward for them to ask us. Okay.
There's a disparity between datasets I would like to ask about. Starting with the publication Provisional Mortality Statistics, reference period January 2020 to December 2021, that was released on 30th of March 2022.
Yep.
The key statistic is 149,486 doctor-certified deaths occurred in 2021. If I then go to your Data Explorer, the figure for deaths and infant deaths, year and month of occurrence, shows deaths in 2021 to be 160,891.
So is the subsequent number published? So the number you first quoted is from March, is the number that was available from doctor-certified deaths up till the end of March. And then the second number you quoted comes from more recent data? Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
No. By month of occurrence, it's 20... I don't know when that was published, but it shows deaths in 2021 to be 160,891, which is higher. So I understand the difference in deaths because some would be autopsy certified and take time to come through. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and in fact you don't get, that's right. As we say when we publish those provisional death numbers, they are provisional. They are the data that we have available on the date on the date at which we finalise the numbers. And as I said earlier, doctor-certified deaths are something like 80 to 85% of all deaths, and so the number goes up when you add the coroner-certified
autopsies. Okay. The figure on the graph for baseline average, is that calculated using provisional mortality or final data from the cause of death data set?
I'm pretty confident. We can check, but I'm pretty confident it's final.
Thank you. And does it include, that would include then autopsy deaths?
Yes.
Okay. Provisional mortality is a widely shared data set that informs much debate around our COVID response. It's running well above our historical range. From today's exchange, we know that the figure for provisional mortality understates actual rates of mortality, and your data set does make that clear.
Yes.
So this isn't a criticism.
No.
What I would like to know is by how much does provisional mortality understate actual mortality in percentage terms on average? I think you say 85%?
I think the number that we get 2 months after the reference period is about 85% of the final number.
Okay, thank you. Just like to go briefly to data collection. A constituent of mine in Queensland has contacted me in person during a listening session in Rockhampton just recently. This elderly lady had a single, lives alone, widowed, had a terrifying interaction with the Australian Bureau of Statistics that raises questions about either the staff training or your understandings of the fair exercise of power. The ABS maintain a dataset called the National Nutrition and Physical Activity Survey, which apparently involves Australians being selected at random to participate. The survey consists of an Australian Bureau of Statistics officer visiting the selected person's home and taking their height, weight, blood pressure and waist measurement, which is compulsory. Then the citizen has the option of submitting a voluntary blood and urine sample. Is that correct?
I think so. I think that is correct.
The constituent in this case advises she lives alone and to the ABS worker, and after receiving a series of letters they thought was a joke, an ABS field worker came by their home in the dark at 6:30 p.m, showed her credentials, asked for her by name and advised the constituent must submit to the government-mandated physical. When the constituent declined, she was threatened by her worker with a fine of $222 per day until she submitted to this physical examination by a complete stranger. Is that how the ABS runs this survey?
Well, I can't comment on a specific event. We obviously do our best to treat people with in a dignified way. It is true that the surveys that we run are compulsory, but we also allow for the possibility that people who have extenuating circumstances can apply not to be part of the survey, and people do that on occasions. It is important for in order to be able to collect data that is representative, that we can indeed choose a representative sample. But it is also true that for people who are in circumstances in which they find it particularly difficult, or the circumstances that you described, we are understanding.
That goes to my next question. Why can't you get this information from hospital records for admitted patients with de-identified data? Why pull names out of a hat, knock on their door, call out for them by name and terrorise them into submission? Because it seems like a massive overreach when there are alternative ways of doing it. Maybe the alternative ways are not entirely random, but they could be made so, couldn't they? So
our aim is not to terrify people, just to make it clear.
This lady was terrified.
Well, I'm sorry about that. We obviously train our interviewers to be sensitive to people. The general issue of being able to find alternative ways to get the data, we are very much alive to those possibilities. What you're talking about is an example of using big data instead of surveys, and there's a worldwide move from national statistical offices to do precisely that, both because the big data sets that are becoming available, there are increasing numbers of them. So, for instance, recently, early in COVID, we started using single-touch payroll from the tax office to be able to give high-quality, up-to-date information about employment. That's an example of a big data set. But it is also true that response rates around the world are falling because people are, for whatever reason, but I suppose people are getting less happy to respond to the surveys of the national statistical offices. So that's another push factor to lead us to do precisely what you're suggesting. Now, we haven't accessed the particular data set that you have talked about, but the general proposition that we are moving in the direction of using big data and taking the burden off individuals and businesses is very much a journey that we're on.
Thank you. Have you ever found someone...
But my colleague would like to add something to that.
Teresa Dickinson, Deputy Australian Statistician. For some of the surveys that we run, there are not alternative sources that we could avail ourselves of. And the survey that you referred to, the nutrition survey, it has quite a range of questions that we ask people before we come to the physical measurements. And it's things like diet, so we ask people to recall what they've eaten, sometimes do a food diary. That's the type of thing that we can't get from big data, and in which there's quite a range of interest from users, including Department of Health, Treasury and so on.
And by big data, you mean data that can be automatically collected, harvested
from the example that you
data
gave,
set.
such as hospital data. Yeah.
Okay. That's right. Have you ever fined someone for refusal?
Yes, and we fine a small number of people for not filling in the census,
Yes.
but not a large number. I mean, 10 million people fill it in, or 10 million households fill it in, and the number of people we fine are very small.
Minister, are you happy with this elderly widow? She was terrified.
Well, I think and I'm sure the ABS and Dr. Gruen would be very happy to follow up an individual matter if you're able to support your constituent to raise that, if she felt vulnerable over that, because there's always, I think resolving these issues is important, but I also, I think there's ways to do that. So I'd certainly encourage you to think about how you could facilitate that. I think I also totally support, the need to seek this information, because it helps in so many ways understanding what's going on. I'm currently, for example, being selected for one of the household surveys, I think for 9 months. Do you get selected? 8 months. So I'm about 3 months into that.
Just identified yourself.
And it's been
take you out of the pool now.
It's been made very clear to me when I inquired about having to do it, the compulsory nature of it and the consequences for not filling things out every month.
They didn't believe you when you said you were too busy, did they?
I had very helpful advice from the ABS when I rang to try and get out of it, and I was politely told that they were not grounds for getting out of it. So, that's how we get information about what's happening across the country.
Yeah.
But yes, I don't think anyone sitting here would say they took any comfort in thinking that an elderly woman felt terrified by it. That's not the intent. And I'm sure there's ways to work through that.
I applaud your comments about the need to use data in government, but I don't see much of it, and I'm not talking about this government on its own, I'm talking about previous governments as well. One of the sad things is that government doesn't use data in making policy and legislation, in my view.
But it's not just government. I mean, so many people rely on the ABS data sets for their work.
Senator Roberts, I do need to share the call.
Last question?
Great, thank you.
Dr. Gruen, you mentioned something about people becoming, I took it to mean that they're becoming more reluctant to share data.
More reluctant to participate in surveys.
Yeah, is that due to the pushback because of, what is it cause? Is it partly due to, or maybe majorly due to, the intrusion into people's lives during COVID?
So it's a phenomenon that predates COVID, and it's global. So
it's what?
It's global. It happens in all. It happens in all countries I'm aware of, that there has been a gradual decline in response rates to surveys. We have a higher response rates than most advanced countries for many of our high-profile surveys, like the labour force survey, which I think the minister must be enrolled in.
Mine's a household.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can I ask? Okay.
Yeah. How many people in my house? What are we doing? How hard are we working?
Yeah, no,
I'm skewing the statistics.
That's the labour force survey.
Oh, is it?
We have the labour force expert.
Which way?
Okay.
Which way are you skewing the statistics?
Because I work so much, I'm off the scale, And why are you working so hard? I fill it all out.
On the web?
Because the pesky senator's asking questions instead of
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
I just got distracted and entirely lost control of the committee.
No, you didn't. We're still in control.
Thank you. Have you concluded your question,
Yes,
Senator Roberts?
thank you.
Thank you very much.